The show is in honor of, and I'm Ed Salick, and my co-host Paul Dietrich. And we continually bring you programs to benefit veterans and their families. And one of the topics that we haven't touched upon as of yet is legal services, and a very important topic. So, Paul, I'm going to turn it over to you and introduce our guest, please.
Sure. Today we have a guest from the Volunteers of Legal Service, Peter Kempner. Would you like to introduce yourself, Peter?
Sure, Paul. So my name is Peter Kempner. I am the Legal Director and Senior Law Project Director here at Volunteers of Legal Service. I'll start off by telling you a little bit about our organization. Volunteers of Legal Service was actually founded back in 1984 in response to federal budget cuts to legal services funding throughout the country. And the big law firms and the New York City Bar Association knew that those funding cuts were going to be causing a justice gap in New York, and they wanted to use volunteer attorneys to help fill that gap. And at the time, the big law firms actually didn't have the infrastructure in place to do pro bono services. So we had these attorneys that wanted to help on one hand, and on the other hand, we had the communities and the legal services providers that needed the help. And so they actually created Volunteers of Legal Service to be a bridge between the lawyers and the community in order to facilitate that work. Luckily, 3.5 decades later, the big law firms have really great infrastructure in order to do pro bono legal services. And the legal services providers on the ground have very much used to tapping into that resource as well. And so we have evolved with that changing landscape, and we have a number of projects that help facilitate legal services for low-income communities in New York. And one of those projects that I'm here to talk to you about today is our Veterans Initiative, which is actually part of our Senior Law Project. And our focus in this project is to do wills and powers of attorneys and healthcare proxies and other advanced directives for older veterans to make sure that they have the right plan in place if they were to ever become incapacitated or for when they pass away. We want to make sure that they're able to make their wishes clear and empower the people that they love and trust the most to be able to care for them. I have been a legal services attorney for over 20 years now. And actually the last decade I've spent doing legal services for veterans in various capacities, representing veterans in housing court proceedings, doing their life planning, in benefits work as well. And I also teach and created the Veterans Justice Clinic at New York Law School that I've taught for the last 7 years.
Excellent. And what I'll point out to the veterans, particularly in the audience, is many veterans have deployed during their time in the service. For example, my own deployment. And one of the big things about getting ready to deploy is exactly what you're talking about. You do your will, you do your powers of attorney, you do your medical proxy, so that all those documents are done so that should something happen while you're deployed, the legal aspects of it are already taken care of. And particularly, I found for the younger veterans, it's like, I don't need to do that. Yes, you do. You have to sit here. You have to do a will. You have to do a power of attorney. And by the way, we want a limited power of attorney because all of us have heard the horror stories. I had one when I was deployed in Iraq where one of my young soldiers, his wife took off with all of the money in the bank account and every asset he owned, and here he is sitting in Iraq and he's got nothing. And you just don't need that kind of thing while you're deployed. There's enough stress on you without having the additional stressors of something like that going on behind you.
Ironically, it was a common thing that was happening.
It's still a common thing.
When I served during the Vietnam conflict, it was very common for guys to get Dear Johns. And by the way, not only is it a Dear John, but we have all of your money.
And now it can be a Dear Jane.
Yeah.
So it happens both ways. But the point is, the time to do all of this is before you're in a crisis, before you're in an emergency. And this is a very timely topic for many of our veterans as we all age. So, what type of civil legal services and needs of low-income veterans in New York City?
We find the number one need for veterans in New York is housing. And frankly, landlord-tenant law for any low-income New Yorker is often the greatest. The rent is high and the incomes are low, and those create situations where people are really housing insecure. And I'm sure you know all about the veterans homelessness crisis that has gone on for way too long. And so making sure that veterans have safe and secure housing is the top need. But frankly, that need is really intertwined with so many other needs because being housing insecure is often tied to being income insecure. And so if you have a veteran who is disabled, who isn't on service connection, is trying to get service connection, the VA has been denying them benefits or stonewalling them or paying them a lower rate than they're entitled to, that's going to create that situation. And so making sure that veterans have access to benefits will secure their housing. In my work and talking about powers of attorney, if we have a veteran who is, incapacitated and can't deal with the landlord, if they have subsidized housing and they can't, deal with HUD-VASH Section 8 in order to do their recertifications, that's also going to lead to housing insecurity. And so really the civil legal needs of low-income veterans are an interconnected web, right, of problems. And one thing often leads to another. And so we make sure that we're providing legal services in a way that recognizes that, right? That we make sure that everybody is, all our staff, and we encourage this from other legal services providers, screening for military service. So we're able to identify those issues to see if, okay, we know our client is a veteran, and so can we set them up with some other services or benefits that will ultimately solve their problems?
Okay. One thing I just would point out to you is when you're screening them for veterans services, what we've found is that there are a number of veterans that don't identify as veterans for whatever reason. In particular, the female veteran population, for some reason, does not seem to identify. And in all of our screening devices, I work with the courts here for the Veterans Court on Staten Island. We've changed the wording so that we ask them, have you ever served in the armed forces of the United States, rather than, are you a veteran?
Right.
And believe it or not, that seems to bring out almost double the number of people that are veterans who, for whatever reason, don't screen themselves as, don't, seem to think of themselves as veterans. It's just a point that I bring out all the time because some people don't identify as veterans for whatever reason. Maybe they think just because I served in Europe or wherever that they're not veterans because they didn't serve in a combat zone. It's not the case.
Right, I absolutely agree. And I think when I phrased it, I said military service. And we always try to say, active duty reserve, National Guard, because we want to be as inclusive as possible. And then we could drill down on discharge status and error of service and all of those things later on, if it becomes relevant to benefit eligibility. But we want to cast as wide a net as possible. And you're absolutely right. A lot of folks who have bad paper or whatever it is may not identify that way. Time of service, theater of service, whatever it is.
Could you tell us about the volunteers of your organization, VOLS?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have staff attorneys in our senior law project where our veterans initiative is housed, as myself and 3 other staff attorneys. But we are really lucky to have a whole group of fantastic volunteers from our law firm and corporate in-house partners who do this work side by side with us. So each year we tap into over 1,000 volunteers that not only work with our project, but across our projects. And we have a number of different practice areas. We have a micro enterprise project that helps small businesses, unemployed workers project that helps people access unemployment insurance benefits, immigration project, and through all these projects, we have hundreds and hundreds of volunteers that work with us at our partner law firms and in-house at corporations. And they're the ones that really allow us to amplify our work and to reach as many people as possible. And, you know, pro bono service is so important in the legal community. You know, this is, you know, really, you know, I know that folks are often down on lawyers, but it is an honorable profession that you know, people can give back because they have that education and those skills and frankly, the resources to be able to do that.
I know you had mentioned about the status of a veteran's claim, for example, with the VA. Do you actually assist them in that very specific narrow area of service, or do you farm that out?
Yeah, we don't do service connection or VA claims at all. We don't do discharge status upgrades. You know, there is actually a network of legal services providers in New York City, and each one of us kind of have our niche. And so there's the New York City Bar Justice Center, and they help veterans access VA benefits, mostly service connection, and claims that have been denied by the VA. There's the Veteran Advocacy Project that has a large practice around discharge upgrades, and they do other work as well. There's the Veterans Justice Project at Legal Services NYC, and a big part of their practice is representing veterans in eviction proceedings. There's a New York Legal Assistance Group's Veterans Project. They do a wide range of benefits work and discharge upgrade work as well. And this network of legal services providers, we actually all have a working group together. And so I actually co-chair that with another attorney, and we get together on a quarterly basis to make sure that we're coordinating our activities, to make sure that we're educating each other about what's going on in the community, what resources, what trainings, and all of those things are out there. Because unfortunately, the resources are scarce, right? And so we try to be smart as a legal services community in how we serve the veteran community and making sure that there's a wide range of services available.
Okay, the reason I asked is I know for a fact that the VFW, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and the American Legion both have certified service officers who are able to help that veteran, again, free of charge, whether you're a member or not. Those organizations are out there. Here on Staten Island, we also have a state service officer who again helps people with their claims. When my own claim came up for my hearing loss, I went through the American Legion. It took about a year. You have to be patient. It's just like filing your taxes. It's going to take a while, and they finally got it done. So you would normally not go to your group for that type of assistance. That would go through one of those providers. I would recommend it. And it's much better than trying to do it yourself. It's extremely complicated procedure.
And now the New York City Department of Veteran Services also has claim agents as well that are
Yes, they do.
accredited. So that, you know, there are more and more resources out there. I think the attorneys often tend to, you know, do the appeals, and as it works its way up, you know, the system in the VA and through the courts. So yeah, you know, you're absolutely right. You know, and it's great that there's more and more resources out there for veterans to get assistance with their claims.
Peter, why is it important for the older veterans to have the right documents in place? Maybe you can lay it out for the older veteran who's watching this on television.
Absolutely. So, you know, the common calls that we get, one is the person who calls us and says, I want to get a will, right? And their thinking is, well, if I get a will, that's what I need, right? That's all I need. And we like to take a step back and talk to that veteran and tell them, really, the will's just one piece of the puzzle. There's a whole wide range of documents that you need, and different documents serve different purposes. First of all, we want to think about planning for during your lifetime, right? A will dictates what happens to your stuff after you pass away. I'm actually most concerned with what happens to you while you're still here. And so we got to think about a couple things during your lifetime. One is healthcare decision making, and the second is financial decision making. And with respect to healthcare, we want to make sure that if you're unable to communicate with your doctor, if you're unable to make your own decisions, that you get to pick who makes those decisions for you, and you're able to give them guidance about what that decision is. Some people don't want to be hooked up to a bunch of machines at the end of their life. Other people want to fight for every second they have on this earth. And there's both legitimate points of view. And there's frankly a lot of gray area in between. And so we want to make sure that people are able to communicate that in advance, and also to be able to pick the person that they trust the most to carry out those wishes. And so to that end, we do a living will, and that's where you get to telegraph what you want. And then we do the healthcare proxy, where you appoint somebody to be able to step into your shoes if you can't do it yourself. And then on the financial piece during your lifetime, we do the power of attorney. And I know that that's it's a powerful document, right? Often a power of attorney could be a license to steal. You give somebody power of attorney, they could go into your bank account and take the money out and do all sorts of stuff. And so we want to make sure that we're having a conversation with our veteran clients, that they are picking somebody that they trust, right? And that that they are not just handing out this power willy-nilly. And look, the power of attorney is super important, and probably the most important document that we could do, because first of all, who's going to pay the rent if you can't do that yourself, right? And so somebody's got to be able to have authority to write those checks to the landlord, or if you own your home, to write those mortgage payments to the bank. If you're on some sort of benefit where there's any kind of annual recertification, somebody needs to be able to put that paperwork in on your behalf. Otherwise, those benefits could get cut off. If you have a lease and you get a renewal lease every year, somebody's got to be able to sign that. And if you're unable to do that yourself, that again could lead to eviction. And so really, in a lot of ways, the power of attorney is what keeps a roof over people's heads. Because there's taking care of those financial things. And unfortunately, if somebody doesn't have a power of attorney in place, what your loved ones will need to do is to go to court to get a guardianship. And guardianship proceeding in court, first of all, when you file, right, they're not going to just take your word for it. The judge isn't going to say, oh, well, Ed's incapacitated, we're just going to rubber stamp this. No, they're going to make sure they do an investigation, right? And so that involves a court-appointed investigator doing home visits, talking to your doctor, pulling your medical records, talking to friends and neighbors and relatives to see if you really are incapacitated. Courts are not fast, right? So it is a time-consuming process. It doesn't happen overnight. And lastly, if you're a loved one or your family member who's taking on this responsibility, if they work full time and they can't get off time to go to court, if they live out of state, they're going to have to hire a lawyer to navigate that process. So this is intrusive, time consuming, and costly. And it could all be avoided by having these documents in place. And so to me, the most important thing is planning for a lifetime, making sure you have those tools with the right people. On the other side of things, after somebody passes away, we want to make sure that your wishes are clear, right? That you have that last will and testament that says, you know, who you want to get your belongings to, your home to, whatever it is. And then also what happens to you, right? What happens to your body after you pass away. We actually do another document called the Appointment of Agent for the Control of the Disposition of Remains, which is a real mouthful. So we'll just call it the Control of Remains form. And that Control of Remains form appoints an agent to be in charge of your final resting. You tell them, I want to be buried, I want to be cremated, I want to go to the VA cemetery, I've got this plot set out, whatever it is, whatever pre-arrangements you have, it's all put in that document and clearly gives somebody authority to claim your remains and carry out your wishes. And often people say, well, why don't I just put that in my will? Frankly, your will is a piece of paper until it goes through the court process, and we don't want to wait, right, to deal with your body. We want to deal with that right away. So we separate that process out, put it in a separate document, and then, you know, somebody could take care of that, and we'll deal with your stuff later on.
Just a couple of background stories from dealing with veterans that I've seen ready to bring out the importance of this. Every year, I belong to both the Legion and the Veterans of Foreign Wars. Every year we will get calls from family members. My father passed away, my husband passed away. I don't have a copy of his discharge and I want to have final honors. You will not get final honors unless you can present the discharge. And having that all set up in advance as a part of this package makes your life so much makes the family's life so much easier. Here, I know on Staten Island, 4 or 5 times, we have had to bring one out of our files, because we keep a file in our safe, and we've fortunately been able to find 5 or 6 of these discharges and bring them to the funeral home so that the family at least has those final honors. And that not only includes a service, but it includes the presentation of a flag and all of those other things that that veteran earned. So this is just a piece of the picture and part of the reason why you need to do this type of planning up front so that it's all in place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And too often we get these calls from people, you know, not just the family members of somebody who passed away, but I actually was just talking to a wife of a veteran last week who called and said, I can't access my husband's bank account. You know, he's in the Bronx VA hospital and I need power of attorney. And I said, well, okay, well, let me talk to him. Because, you know, power of attorney, you can't get over somebody. It's something that somebody voluntarily gives. And she says, you can't talk to him. He has dementia. And you know, he's unable to communicate. And unfortunately for him, it was too late. And so then my advice turned to the guardianship piece, which, you know, I want people to avoid. And so it really is often at these times of crisis when people think about these things. And they really should be thinking about them way in advance. When they're healthy, when they're younger, when these things aren't in crisis mode. Because, you know, when it's too late, it's too late. I can't turn back the clock of time.
Yes. The other thing I'll point out about the discharges for our veterans out there is that the Records Center for discharges and for other documents has been closed for the last 2 years, basically, since COVID came in, and they're just now starting up. So they've got a huge backlog of documents that they've got to try to get out to people. So if you didn't have that simple document that every veteran got when they got out of the service, because they made sure to give it to you before they booted you out, but all of these problems can happen. So very, very critical piece of paperwork, and tying it into all the other documents is just so important to the veteran and to the family.
Peter, besides planning for the future, what other services can be provided for the veteran?
You know, the other thing is, you know, a wide range of legal advice. And so, you know, and often, again, that ties back to housing. And, you know, so we often counsel veterans who are are facing eviction or facing other issues related to their housing repairs issues, other things as well. And so, veterans are free to give us a call. And I think you'll provide our contact information at the end. So we operate a free hotline for veterans to be able to talk to a lawyer, to get guidance on their civil legal needs, and to be able to hopefully help them out, right? So unfortunately, those needs are wide. I think that the VA does their challenge survey every year to find out what the unmet needs of veterans are, and legal needs are always at the top of that list, because there are civil legal services out there for our veterans.
Is there a contact number that the veterans can use to reach out and with questions, not necessarily for you, but maybe for the organization?
Sure. I mean, to reach our Veterans Initiative, call 347-521-5704. You could also visit our website, which is www.volsprobono.org. That's VOLSPROBONO.org. Just click on the Veterans Initiative tab. We actually have a number of resources there, both about planning for the future, but actually also about VA burial benefits and other benefits as well, because getting pre-approved for those benefits also, right? So it's not just having your DD-214, having your power of attorney and your healthcare proxy and your will in place. If you get pre-approval from the VA, that's another piece of that puzzle, where you really want to hand your family on a silver platter. Right? They're going to be distraught when you pass away. And so as much as you can set that out for them, the better. So those resources are there as well as our contact information about how to access our services.
And we will have all of these, the website and your phone number in our credits at the end of the show, just as a backup in case you didn't get it during the show.
Well, I want to thank you, number one, Peter, for coming on, and I'd like to extend the invitation for you to come back another time if we find more areas of topic that we should bring to the attention of the veteran. We certainly will do that, and it's very, very helpful what you've done for us today, and what you've done for any veteran watching the program. It's so important. And I want to thank the public for watching In Honor Of. I want to thank my co-host, Paul Dietrich, for making it work. And quite frankly, Paul's the one that comes up with all these ideas and brings the people in, and he does one hell of a job, which is why he was a colonel. Anyway, you just keep watching In Honor Of. We love you for watching. We will continue to bring you information that'll help you in your life and your family, and God bless.